All right, let's dive into something that trips a lot of people up in English grammar, finite verbs. Now, I know the name sounds a bit technical, right? But stick with me because by the end of this, you're going to see it's actually super simple. We're going to clear up that whole mystery of why verbs keep changing their form. Let's do it. So, have you ever found yourself staring at a sentence and just wondering, why does this verb look different here? It feels like it has a mind of its own sometimes, right? Well, it's a super common question, and believe it or not, there's a really simple, logical reason for it. Okay, let's just look at a really basic example. You've got he goes. Simple. But then, if we swap out he for they, suddenly it's they go. See that? Same action, different word. This little shapeshifter of a verb, it actually has a name. And that name is a finite verb. So, what in the world is a finite verb? Let's get right to the definition. And there you have it. A finite verb is just a verb that's controlled by two things in the sentence. That's it. First, the subject, who or what is doing the thing, and second, the tense, when the thing is happening. That's the whole secret. It's what makes sure your subject and verb actually match up, which, is pretty important if you want your sentences to make sense. Okay, definitions are one thing, but it's way easier to understand when you see it in action, right? So let's look at a couple of examples. We're going to see exactly how these two bosses, the subject and the tense, tell the verb what to do. All right, first up, let's see what happens when we just change the subject, the person doing the action. So here we have he. That's one person, right? So the verb is goes. He goes. Easy. Now, what do you think is going to happen if we change that subject? Yup, you got it. As soon as the subject changes from he to they, the verb has to change too. It goes from goes to go. It has no choice. The verb must agree with its subject. That's rule number one for finite verbs. Okay, so that's the subject. Now let's look at the other controller, the tense, the time. Let's see how changing when something happens makes the verb change. So in this sentence, everything is happening right now, in the present. I am reading a book. That verb form, am reading, tells us this is happening as we speak. It's locked into the now. But watch this. What if we shift it to the past? The person is still reading a book, the action is the same, but because it already happened, the verb has to change. It becomes was reading. See how the tense is totally in charge of the verb's form? Okay, so we've seen how the subject and the tense are basically the bosses of the verb. But what if I told you there's an even simpler, kind of golden rule to remember all this? Here it is. This is the main thing to take away. A finite verb is one that changes with time. That's it. That's the whole idea. It's the verb that's tied to the timeline of your story. So, to wrap it all up, it's really this simple. If you see a verb that changes its form because the subject changed or because the tense changed, boom, that's a finite verb. Think of it as the rule follower in the world of grammar. It does what it's told by the subject and the tense. And that leaves us with one last pretty interesting question. We've talked all about the verbs that change, but what about the verbs that don't? What do we call a verb that just stays the same, no matter who the subject is or when it's happening?